the greater the difference between you and your partner, the greater the sexual charge. So the more you're exclusively an alpha and the more your partner is exclusively an omega, the hotter that sex is going to feel.
Hello, friend, and welcome to the Sex Upgraded podcast, a podcast for men all about sex, where we'll combine real, authentic, and down-to-earth conversations about sex, life, and relationships with some pretty wild personal stories and practical how-to episodes as well, with guest experts from around the world to help you have the most amazing sex life you can possibly have. My name is Taylor, and I'll be your host on this journey, and it's my goal with each episode to give you practical, actionable things you can start doing today to improve your sex life and your entire life, because a thriving sex life will help you thrive in all areas of your life. So let's begin today's episode by starting with a deep breath in through the nose into the belly together. Exhaling with an audible sigh. And let's get into today's episode. Welcome back to part 2 of this conversation. Welcome back, Justin Patrick Pierce, to the conversation. And if you're listening right now or watching this on YouTube, this is actually part 2 of a conversation that we had a few weeks ago. And that episode went so well, and there were so many pieces left that I wanted to dive into that I asked Justin if he would be interested in doing a part 2. And he said, yeah, of course. So here we are. Thank you, Justin, so much for being here. Thank you, listener, for being here. And if you haven't first listened to that episode around sexual polarity and alpha omega consciousness, I would recommend going back and listening to that first, because that will give you a really good frame for all the concepts that we're going to be using here. And we're going to jump into some things with the assumption that you already know some of the terminology that we're going to be using. Yeah, that's the intro that I wanted to give. And Justin, welcome again. Is there anything you'd like to add before we start getting into it?
I'm just really excited to hear that you appreciated our conversation and wanted to dive deeper. So I'm grateful to be here with you. Looking forward to this.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. And thank you to everybody who listened, who sent me questions, follow-up questions for Justin in this episode. I got some good ones to share. And just to give a brief outline of some of the topics I want to go into today, just so we're all on the same page, I want to talk about the cultivation of alpha consciousness in sex, but also in life in general and how we move through the world, because that was a juicy part from the last conversation. I want to talk about how do you penetrate the world as alpha consciousness? What does that even mean as a man, and how do you do that with integrity? I want to talk about how to do that, like, what do we cultivate, or what should men cultivate if they're single and they're wanting to get into a relationship? Because we talked a lot about how to be in long-term relationship, but what are some things men might want to cultivate, if they're going into a new relationship? And what's the role of omega in all that? So the flip side of alpha. A couple more things. There's a really cool piece that my partner Naima and I experienced in the workshop with Justin in London that was around the sexual circuit and keeping sexual energy flowing. I want to get into that. And then I want to explore your model of sexual polarity too, and we'll put the graphic of that up on screen later in this episode, because it's so cool and so useful to see a visual depiction of how sexual arousal and charge can actually come into a relationship and be integrated in a really potent way. And so you don't have to remember all those things. I have an outline here, but I just wanted to give us all a little frame for what I'm excited to get into today. And yeah, I'd love to start with the cultivation of alpha consciousness in the world, and to start with something you said. In our last conversation, you said one of the dangers of being too much in omega for a man is a man's lack of ability to penetrate the world. And I'm curious, what does that mean to you? And could you expand on that a little bit?
Yes, first of all, I love this topic of exploration. I think this is a very powerful subject matter. And if you'd allow me to, I would really like to break it down into its fundamental elements so everyone understands what we're talking about here.
Please.
And how this then becomes an expression into our intimate relationship and then leads to us being able to penetrate the world in a powerful way. We have to begin with consciousness itself. Some teachers might refer to this as pure awareness or awareness. Some teachers might refer to this as I. Some teachers might refer to this as emptiness. But where I'd like everyone to begin is this consciousness that we're talking about, that is alpha, is already your present condition. The part of your experience right now in this moment that is aware, that is awareness itself, mm-hmm. that is like the screen to the movie of your life, to the movie of every moment. So consciousness is the part of your experience that does not change. It's the you that is never changing. And some people hear this initially and like, okay, well, what of me? What's me and what's everything that's changing? And some people think they're their thoughts or they're their body or they're their emotions. And what this teaching is helping us realize is, no, you're not your thoughts. You're not your body. You're not your emotions. Because when we sit and we investigate our direct experience of our own thoughts, emotions, and body, we recognize those are always changing. The body's been changing from when you were 5 years old to when you were 15, to when you were 20, to when you were 30. Your body's constantly changing. So which form of your body is the real you, right?
Yeah.
Your thoughts are changing moment to moment to moment to moment. So which thought is you? Which emotion is you? And what we find is that us in the pure form of consciousness itself is none of the above. It's no object that we could possibly observe or perceive in any sense. So the alpha practice, there's only one alpha practice. There's only one alpha practice. It's to rest as consciousness. It's to realize that you are that I that is infinite, perfectly free, formless. And that's what all of these teachings are intended to reveal to us. That we are that I, that consciousness, that alpha whole. So the first practice would be to rest as that consciousness. And there's a lot of spiritual practices that teach this, that do this. There's many popular teachers today teaching this modality to men and women. And what we observe as we explore consciousness, consciousness is not a man thing and not a woman thing, right? Consciousness is what all of us are. We are that same consciousness, right? And that's one of the primary reasons in my teaching I don't use the words masculine and feminine, because I think often it gets confused that men are consciousness and women are something other than consciousness. Here we're trying to explore what is true, what is absolutely true, what is universally true. And the truth is that we are all that pure awareness, that pure consciousness. That principle is what we are. As we rest into that experience, using different forms of meditation or other forms of practice to wake up and realize our condition as pure consciousness, it doesn't require anything of the body. We could, as many sages over thousands of years have done, like let's take Ramana Maharshi, for example. Ramana Maharshi realized perfected consciousness. And anyone who knows Ramana Maharshi, I mean, his body became very decrepit. He went through like a full death process to arrive at that place of pure consciousness. So while he is a perfect example of a living embodiment of consciousness purified in a human being, what we'll also notice is he's not very sexually polarizing.
Yeah.
He's not the beacon of like sexual confidence and this polarizing character that makes panties wet.
Right.
Some people might be turned on by his vibe. But for the majority of folks, when we think about sexuality, we don't think of Ramana Maharshi as being a sex symbol.
Totally.
So this exploration, the sexual yogas, is how do we, as men, if we want to bring more of that alpha quality, first recognize ourselves as that consciousness, but then begin to bring that awareness of consciousness through our body-mind such that it expresses itself in a way where the force of our consciousness can be felt and expressed as intimate love, as something that penetrates our partner and penetrates the world. So let's talk about this one idea of confidence, right? Because confidence is a thing that every woman wants in a man, and men even want in themselves. Men want to feel confident. They want to feel confident in their work in the world, and they want to feel confident in the bedroom and in their relationship. And men struggle with confidence a lot. Well, where do we get this confidence that's taught in this body of work? Well, in our Western world, we have a lot of strategies to develop confidence through skill building. Our world is focused on self-development. Let's develop ourself and we'll become the greatest version of ourself. And we'll learn this skill and that skill, and we'll develop this and develop that. And in fact, a lot of the teachings that explore masculine and feminine dynamics and masculine training are built in this vein. They're built on saying, you want to be a better man? Well, you got to run through this obstacle course, and you got to sit this way, and you got to breathe this way, and you got to do this thing. And all of that is great practice and great tools, just like a great workout serves you. But what I tend to observe is there's a missing of the fundamental awareness that's needed for real depth and transformation to take place inside of any practitioner, which is understanding where we're doing this from. And so when people pursue self-development, they're trying to make themselves great so they cannot fail. So I could have this kind of confidence where I'm strong enough, I'm smart enough, I'm successful enough, where nothing can break me or push me down. And from that vein of self-development, while we still continue to protect ourselves, we'll find that our confidence is fickle. It's fragile. It's temporary. It's a facade of sorts. Because the moment she criticizes you, the moment she breaks up with you, the moment this happens or that, you suddenly feel, I'm a failure. And it's even worse because you've done all this self-development work to be great, and now you're failing. So your confidence was built on a mound of sand.
Yeah, and when I'm hearing you describe it also and seeing your body motions, I'm getting the visual or the conceptual feeling that they're also sort of lost in the sauce of it, just so immersed in it, kind of missing the more expanded perspective.
Absolutely. And so when we wake up to the realization that we are consciousness itself, then we actually become indestructible, immortal. And that's a real element of achievement in these spiritual paths. That idea of immortality was certainly taught in the Taoist tradition. What do they mean by immortal? Do they mean live forever? Or do they mean realizing the you that is already immortal and untouchable? And when we wake up to the awareness that we are, we recognize that awareness is untouched, unharmed by anything that comes our way. And so as we develop this practice in alpha, we must come from that understanding first, that you already are consciousness itself. It's not about achieving some higher level of consciousness that you may one day become, and then you will earn your manhood. That's, again, building your entire identity on a mound of sand. From this position, you're standing on a foundation that can withstand the test of time because you know yourself as consciousness itself, and nothing can take that away from you. Nothing can harm that. You will never be lesser than that. And it's that awareness that brings a real confidence in us in human beings. And so when we practice alpha, we must practice from that fundamental position of knowing. And that's why I say there's only one alpha practice: to rest as consciousness, to know yourself as that consciousness. Everything else is just tricks to try and build a superior ego, a superior form of selfhood, which at the end of the day is just subject to fall apart.
So when we're using the words penetrate the world, I'm getting that to mean, let's see, how do I articulate this? Like I'm in the work meeting, or I'm going to give a presentation outside of the sexual context. I go in, and instead of being sort of lost in the sauce of all the ideas and the things that I want to make sure I convey, I'm first like anchoring within myself and resting back in a more expanded awareness, while also being able to bring these other things through. But it's from that space of expanded awareness that I then enter the room of the meeting, and then I begin speaking from that place versus sort of being lost in the sauce. And then that level of awareness and the words that come from that place and the posture that comes from that place is going to be more impactful and penetrative in the sense of, being more impactful or being more easily digestible or more
Yes.
Right?
Yes, and what we'll find is that each of us has our own unique relationship with the embodiment of consciousness. So we'll get to that next step in the embodiment of consciousness. But what I want to say is that when we embody the full force of our consciousness and express it out, people can be very intimidated by it. Mm-hmm. People can feel very scared or even threatened by it, even when you mean no harm. You can have a perfectly open heart with pure intentions, but just because of the way you sit and speak so directly, the way you breathe through your whole body, it's intimidating to feel that force. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people learn to shrink to make themselves feel safer. So let me hide that strength. Let me retract from my body because I don't want to intimidate anyone. I don't want to penetrate the room. I don't want to penetrate you when I talk to you. I want to be safe. Yeah. So we hide our strength and we become disembodied. Our breath becomes shallow, our shoulders round. We might start to sit and lean like this, where we're now hiding the strength of that consciousness in our form.
Yeah.
Now, the first thing that we want to learn as we do this art form is we want to stop hiding. We want to learn what it is when I take this consciousness that I have and I actually start by bringing it through my whole body. What happens when I sit in a way where every muscle in my body is innervated with conscious awareness, where I'm aware of the position of my knees, of my spine, of my hands, of my shoulders? When I'm aware of the breath that I take, every breath I take, I'm aware. I'm aware of the flow of the breath. As I inhale, I draw the breath deep down into my whole body. And as I exhale, I let the breath rise up through my whole body. Now I'm becoming very present and conscious because I'm letting that consciousness innervate my body. And now this is the embodiment of consciousness. This is where we start to actually run that consciousness through our form, and that has an effect. Right?
Yeah.
So,
you gonna add two pieces to that?
Of course.
Yeah. So this is really important stuff because research has shown that I think it's 93% of creating, or 93% of trustability in terms of human relationships comes from body posture, body language, and tone of voice and speed of speech, which you could say is all an embodiment of consciousness, So the more you're able to craft an art form through your posture of consciousness, like the more effective you're going to be, like in everything.
Yes. Yes. And then that's the area we get into around intentionality, right? Because there's the embodiment of alpha and there's the embodiment of omega. And when you're interacting with another human being, whether it's your intimate partner or a friend group or business colleagues, sometimes bringing just pure alpha to those interactions isn't the right thing. It's not the right tone to the moment. right? So oftentimes when I teach and I speak, I'm bringing more of that alpha quality. So it could actually be off-putting to people, the way that I speak and the way that I sit, because that's not what they want. What they would need is they would need me to kind of soften up and loosen up and be a little smiley and a little more animated and really expressive in my feeling, which now that's all omega energy. And that omega energy feels safe and fun and playful. I'm like, hey, this guy's fun. He's a cool guy. So this is why it's important to develop both alpha and omega qualities in our own experience. So we want to be able to run both those energies through our nervous system such that when we are in front of our intimate partner or walking into that business meeting, you know how to tune to one or the other. What's appropriate now? What's appropriate now? Because if you have so much omega energy in you, you don't know how to sit still and be serious and look someone in the eye. They may not trust you with $1 million.
Totally.
So you need to be able to have a depth where you could anchor in and they can feel your solidity and your seriousness. Right? That's an important part. They're feeling, can I trust this person? But if you're always in alpha and always that serious, they may also have a difficult time trusting you as well, because they say, this person's not relatable. They're not fun. You know, I can't feel their heart is what would also often be said.
Yeah.
So then it would be valuable for that person to develop more omega expression, because someone says, oh, now I can feel your heart. You know, so that person now shares a personal story about how they felt one day, and suddenly everyone falls in love and goes, oh, I can relate. That's so beautiful. As opposed to the person who's always pulled back and never sharing anything personal, which feels too cold.
Yeah.
So the reason why my body of work is broken down in the way that it is because alpha and omega embodiments serve. And whether you're man or woman, it would serve you to develop both of these capacities. And even just talking about your intimate relationship, because there's times for you to be alpha and there's times for you to be omega. And by having access to both, you become a masterful lover.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm going to expand that masterful lover in sex and outside of sex, lover with the world too. This is one thing I really appreciated when Naima and I came to the workshop with you in London, this piece around how you in London seemed to intentionally embody these different polarities, even in your teaching, even in how you greeted people. And it was cool to feel that. So we got there in London, was like, hey, it's so good to see you, like giving the hugs, like, where'd you come from? All this body movement type stuff. And you were more like the handshake, the directed, focused consciousness piece. And I've seen you in other videos and photos you posted on social media, you know, with your kids, and like, you can totally do the omega thing. But in that context, it was very cool to feel the contrast and feel the transmission of both of those. And yeah, I like if you've been watching the video version of this episode, you would probably even see a different flavor in how Justin expressed those two different modes, just physically, visibly in his body. And it's just cool to see that. And I love getting into the nuance of that, because then when we're talking about the ability to shift between that sort of alpha and omega style embodiment, I can imagine playing with that in so many different areas of life, right? Like, yes. I'm a musician and I could drum from an alpha sort of embodiment space or a more omega sort of embodiment space. And you could be a DJ from that space, or you could be a dancer and like play with all these different energies. And it's very cool. The model is very cool.
Yeah. And that's how we think about it. It's like, imagine, everyone listening, imagine that you've been going through the most of your life as a pianist sitting in front of a piano, and you have different notes you can play to express yourself in the world. And what happens as we grow up, as a result of our genetics, as a result of our environment that we were raised, we tend to fall into these habits of expressing ourselves in a certain way. So we find our like 5 or 6 notes that we like to play, and we just play those 5 or 6 notes every situation we're in. And we think, well, this is me. I'm these 5 or 6 notes. And if you don't like it, screw yourself. But these are my notes. This is who I am. Love me or love me not. This is what I bring to the table. in this body of work, what Alpha and Omega opens up is it opens up every key on the piano. And we learn how to practice the lowest note. What is the lowest note? Where we rest back deeply into consciousness itself. Where we rest in that still place where we're not even speaking. Where we just take that vow of silence and rest in that space of being consciousness itself. Mm-hmm. And then we learn how to play each and every note until we get to the highest note, where we learn how to express ourselves and play artistically through dance, through sound, all of these forms where it's the complete opposite of that. And one way a lot of listeners can relate to this, it's like, if you want to know the epitome of alpha practice, go to a Vipassana meditation. Mm. And if you want to know like the further end of the spectrum of Omega practice, go to a 5 rhythms dance class. And within that, you have this range of 2 very different embodiments, but deeply spiritual practices, deeply healing modalities for both men and women. Now, if you want to know what polarity is, imagine a Vipassana meditation where everyone is sitting still and quietly, and then all those 5 rhythm dancers come right into the room and just start dancing and moving and blasting music. And all the meditators are going, what are you doing? You're bothering, you're disturbing my peace. Yeah. And all the dancers are going, you're so boring. Why don't you get up and move? You need to live like this. And that's the tension between Alpha and Omega that exists inside of every intimate relationship. At some level or another, we're going to feel those competing forces challenged. And if we don't understand them, we'll become resentful of our partner because they're different than us in those ways. And so by understanding both of them inside of ourselves, we then have compassion and space for our partner to also occupy those poles. And there's an understanding and appreciation of the gifts that Alpha has to give and the gifts that Omega has to give.
Yeah. Beautiful. Let's all take a breath to that. Yeah. So I want to, with that thread, go into a piece around sexual embodiment cultivation, but first jump back and share a quick personal story around the embodiment and posture piece, because it came to me and I feel like it would be useful. About 1.5 years ago, I was at this somatics workshop where, long story short, like we did a lot of work with posture, and we did a lot of work with noticing how the posture impacted another person's perception of us or experience of us, whether we're more approachable or trustable or open-hearted, etc., that sort of thing. It's very cool stuff. And a reflection that I got from one of the instructors of that was, Taylor, it looks like you're making yourself smaller, actually, or actually, no, it kind of looks like you maybe don't care, or you're a little apathetic with how you're holding yourself. And internally, I remember thinking, whoa, that's crazy, because I care so much. Like I care so much about this experience in this person, and I want to be approachable and I want to be connective with them. And so what I was doing, wasn't aware of it at the time, but I was standing with my legs further apart, more like a triangle type stance, instead of standing straight up. And there was almost like a resting back, but in like a very casual way. And what I learned through kind of speaking it out was that I was actually making myself smaller. And I was lowering my height, making myself smaller, because I'm a kind of tall guy that's kind of fit and strong. And I've had the story sometimes that, people get intimidated by that, or especially if I'm interacting with a woman or somebody who's shorter than me, I should just drop myself down to their level. And I didn't even realize that what that was doing was it was making people feel like I didn't actually care in some way. And not only that, but I wasn't giving them the opportunity to receive me in my fullest expression of being an integrated man, and that was limiting my connection in the world. And so it was a really cool, nuanced piece to play with. And I started in the workshop experimenting with standing up straight and not slouching at all, not leaning back. And it was very uncomfortable at first, but then through the reflections of other people, I learned that was actually a more trustable posture. Like there was a little bit of an edge to it in a certain way, but there was also this, they felt like, oh, there you are. Like I can feel you now. And it was a really beautiful learning. And I share that just to say that there are so many ways we might be doing something and we're not even aware of it with our posture that's not allowing ourselves to be in a full expression of our consciousness. And that might be having some impact that we're not aware of at all.
Yeah. It's absolutely having many impacts we're not aware of all the time.
Yeah.
And so a large part of this practice is to become aware of that. And there's two layers to what you just shared that I want to point out that I think are really important. And I think they can only really be understood for many years in this inquiry, working with thousands of people in this exploration. And it's kind of the first step of this process is like, people are going to feel like, well, how do I find my authenticity? How do I stand like the authentic me? How do I embody my authenticity, right? And that's a great first step. That's a beautiful practice, but it's also not the full, complete practice. Mm-hmm. So what we do is we go, yeah, well, when my hands are kind of in front of my body, I'm closing off the front surface of my body. And when I separate my hands, I'm more available and present automatically because the front surface of my body is revealed and it communicates to anyone there, I'm open and available to you. And this is why whenever we feel awkward or nervous, we immediately put our arms up in front to guard the front surface of the body. So this is one example. Avoiding eye contact is another. So looking at someone in the eyes is also a demonstration of I'm here with you, I'm present with you. As we learn these skills, we also start to calibrate how finely tuned we need to make this. Because if you just start staring everyone in the eye that you're talking to, people are going to start to get experience like, whoa, this guy's intense. Yeah, this is a bit too much, yeah. Right? And in my own training, like I had to go through that phase. I had to straighten my spine to the degree where it was too much. I had to sit to the degree where it was too much. I had to look in the eye where it was too much. I had to breathe to the point where it was too much and run too much through my nervous system until my body like stretched into this new way of being before it could actually begin to relax into something that was a little bit more authentic. So sometimes when we're learning to play these notes, just like playing the guitar or singing, you want to stretch your fingers. You want to stretch your vocal cords to hit notes and play things that are not comfortable and way out of your comfort zone and challenge yourself like, oh, this is so hard to sit this way. Breathe this way. This is so hard for my body. And do it to the point where suddenly it starts to become now natural to you. That's fundamental to all forms of yoga. So that's what we're doing here in this practice. Now, we start to get to the feedback or the point where others are saying, yeah, I trust you more. I feel you present. You feel sincere or authentic to me in the way that you're showing up. But as we fine-tune our practice, it becomes less and less important to us, am I being my authentic self? And the question becomes, is the way I'm showing up right now serving the person in front of me? Because why am I interacting with this person at all? Am I doing this for selfish reasons where I don't care my impact on you? Or am I engaging in you in a way where I actually want to serve you and I want to be of service of you? And in this way, because we've practiced these different notes and scales, we can sit in front of someone and immediately detect, I'll give them eye contact. Oh, look, this eye contact is too intense for them. I'm going to blink and I'm going to turn my eyes away for a moment to make them feel comfortable, and then I'll bring more eye contact back. When I sit like this, oh, this is a little intimidating for them. So I'm actually going to soften my shoulders and turn my body slightly to calibrate to their comfort level so they feel safe. But then I'm going to bring back my strength and come back into an open-bodied posture to show them it's okay. I can be in my strength and I can be safe too. So our inquiry is no longer about, am I being my authentic self? Because in this practice, what we're ideally remembering is that our authentic self is consciousness itself. It's not the body-mind. So I'm already consciousness itself. I'm already every note on the piano. And now, can I press my consciousness through this body mind in a way that expresses love and is of service to the person in front of me? And that's what sexual yoga is all about. Every practice that we do is training you to be with your intimate partner in this way, that you learn how to sit, how to breathe, how to look, how to communicate in a way that actually serves them, opens their heart, makes them feel safe, makes them feel appreciated, and turns them on sexually. So you learn all of the notes that turn them on, and you have no preference, no judgment. You have such freedom in your expression in your body that you can adapt to be of service. But what I want to say for everyone listening is, you're not people pleasing.
Yeah.
You're not doing this just, I'll do whatever you want. I'll become any shape that you want. It's not coming from that place. And if there's a lot of people who have that problem or that story in their minds, we want to break ourselves free from that. So if that's you, first you do want to focus on this, finding your authentic embodiment and truth coming through your body. But again, once we develop that, it's okay. I've got this thing called my authentic self, which for me, there's no limit of. You can authentically become any note on the piano, honestly. It's just what are your preferences and habit patterns. But once you liberate that, it's no longer about you. It's about being of service. And that's where I think this really becomes a path of devotion, not only to our lover, but also towards the world.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And then on the actual visual model of your whole map of polarity and charge and alpha and omega consciousness, devotion is at the top on the upper triangle. And we'll put that on screen at some point. so viewers can see it, and it's in your book too. Yeah, thank you for that. So I'd love to bring this into the sexual cultivation context. And actually outside of partnership with somebody else, because we had another conversation once where I was bringing questions around. Well, I'll just kind of ask a question in a similar way again, and a lot of self-pleasure, self-cultivation practice that I have done, especially in the past when I first started going on my own journey to overcome my own sexual dysfunction, was very pleasure immersive. Right? I would lay down and focus on experiencing pleasure all over my body and moving and writhing around and just trying to reprogram from years of watching porn and years of unhealthy masturbation habits. And it was very effective, over time in a lot of different ways at bringing my erection back without needing porn. It was helpful for me to overcome premature ejaculation and helpful for me in a lot of different ways. And also, there was an element that was missing to that I've really enjoyed playing with over the past year and finding a lot from your work. And there's this, when we talk about alpha or omega embodiment type stuff, my story was that I spent a lot of time in this sort of omega embodiment of sexual exploration with myself, and that impacted how I was able to show up in sexual relationship with another person. So the question is, through solo sexual cultivation, if we want to be the full spectrum or be able to go in both directions, what are some alpha embodiment type things that we could practice in those contexts?
First, I want to say that your exploration in omega and your awareness of that has been an incredible gift to you, and I imagine your intimate partner as well. And that's exactly what I'm referring to. If you were the kind of guy who was so obsessed with being masculine practice, you never would have gone there. You would have been afraid to play those notes on the other end of the piano and be like, oh, I'm a man, I shouldn't be moving that way or doing those things or feeling these ways. So there's an avoidance of those skills. But what you've done is you spent a deep study exploring omega notes for yourself, right? And what I want to point out is, as you do this, there's nothing fundamentally womanly about that.
Totally.
It doesn't make you less of a man exploring those components of your body. Your biology is able to do all of those things. Biology enables, culture forbids. So it's the stories in our mind that only forbids us, but your biology is able. So you've explored that, and that is an incredible incredible gift. And what I hear you saying is like, I'd like to explore now the other end of the piano, and let's get into those alpha notes.
Yeah.
What are those alpha notes that I could be training in my nervous system? So what it sounds like for you, you'd be benefited by it the same way you studied omega to now study sexuality almost exclusively through this alpha scale until they really feel balanced. And then you now have the artistry. I could bring the lowest note. I could bring the highest note. I could play some middle notes. And that's where your liberation and sex comes from, is that full capacity. So what I'm hearing you say is like, let's explore some of these alpha notes. What are they?
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yes. And so for clarity, like I do love exploring some of those alpha notes. Like I love holding my partner down. I love like some of what would fall into that category. And I notice I think my predisposition falls more into the omega type space because of all the things that I've cultivated. And I see how that actually, like there is great beauty in that. And I've become an amazing lover, with my partner because of that, and so deeply appreciated by her. And also there's this piece that I think could serve our relationship more. And it's cool to like go into this in, my own process in this conversation, but by cultivating more of this kind of self-pleasure that is more in the alpha embodiment type space.
Yes.
So what does that look like?
Well, I just want to refine what you said.
Yeah, please.
Because I wouldn't use the word more. I would just say serve your relationship in another way. Right? Because I don't want to give undue importance to alpha for you, because if you were all alpha, what would serve your relationship more would be more of the omega.
100%.
So we want to really think about this is we can always add these skills that are going to amplify our experience intimately. That's why I've been doing this for so long, and my journey is not even close to over. I'm in the middle. There's no end. There's and that's what makes intimacy and sex so fun in a committed relationship. Because when you start practicing this in your relationship, your sex feels like a never-ending journey that's always hot, fun, deeply engaging, spiritually uplifting, and nourishing. It's just incredible. So this is what we get into, and there's always more. Yeah, there's always more
for sure.
So.
Lifelong student.
Yeah, sorry, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. London and I, we are lifelong students of this work, no doubt. So when we get into the alpha pole, remember our primary practice is resting as consciousness. And what we want to do is you would first benefit from doing a seated meditation practice for, let's say, 30 minutes to an hour before you even work with your intimate partner. And I describe this practice in detail in Playing with Fire in the book. But you want time on your own where you can practice just resting as consciousness, so that you're deeply rested in and calibrated for what you're about to bring to the lovemaking session. You're not bringing omega, you're bringing only alpha. Only alpha. So greater the difference between you and your partner, the greater the sexual charge. So the more you're exclusively in alpha and the more your partner is exclusively in omega, the hotter that sex is going to feel. When it's kind of a mishmash mixture, it'll feel a little more resonant and water it down. So what you're saying right now is like, let's bring that extreme of alpha. So the first thing would be a meditative practice where you are practicing resting as consciousness itself. There's many different techniques we could potentially get into, but I'm not going to spend too much time there right now. When you're ready to now engage sexually, what you want to do is you want to begin by putting your body in what I would call alpha body. And what alpha body is it's a grounded, symmetrical shape. And what is the most grounded geometric shape? It's a triangle. Small top, large base at the bottom. That is the most grounded geometrical shape there is. So when I sit, some people, I don't know if you could see the way I'm sitting right now, but I'm sitting on meditation cushions with my knees spread out wide in a kneeling posture. Palms are open, hands are face down on the ends of my knees. And you can just see in my body, I'm in the shape of a triangle. So this triangle shape communicates to my partner groundedness, presence, steadiness. And all of those are the embodiment of what consciousness is, because consciousness is steady. It's not changing. It's not moving. It's just that steadiness. So the body's the first place that we want to go. The next piece that we want to bring in is we want to bring breath, because breath is the bridge that connects us to our intimate partner. And breath is crucially important, particularly for the alpha practitioner, because you're not moving like omega.
So can you give me like a demo, like what do you mean? Like show me, kind of like you're saying you're not moving like omega. Yeah. So what does that mean?
What is omega?
Well, so, yeah, you're saying you're not moving like it. Breath is very important. I'm wondering if you could just show me visually
omega.
Omega versus alpha kind of embodiment.
Yeah. So when I sit down for practice and I'm bringing alpha, I'll be here and still. Mm-hmm. And my intimate partner will sit down and immediately her spine is soft and moving. Her hips are moving. Mm. She'll take a breath and she'll put her hands back. She'll begin to separate her legs and feet. So her body is dynamic. Mm-hmm. So alpha body's grounded, omega body's dynamic. And just if you have one person in that still posture and one person dynamically moving with their body, you already have sexual polarity starting. Mm. But if you have two partners sitting like Buddhas, you're not going to feel sexual polarity.
Yeah.
You'll feel very present with each other, but you'll be like, this isn't sexually interesting. Totally. The moment the one partner starts to drop in and move their body, now you have the beginning of the opposites that create sexual tension. Mm.
So then the charge builds. Yes. And then at a certain point, though, you're not just going to be still the whole time, right?
Exactly.
You're going to move somehow.
Yes. And that's why the breath is so important, because the way that you practice alpha is the movement really comes from your breath. Hmm. So it's your breath that's creating the movement for alpha, and it makes your partner feel like you're with them. So if you were in an alpha posture and you only had grounded body with no breath and you were just looking at them, it would become awkward really quick. Your partner would be like, why are you looking at me like that? You know, like, I can't feel you, right? Would be their complaint. You just feel like empty. Mm-hmm. So in sexual yoga and as alpha, we come out of our stubborn consciousness and say, okay, I'm going to offer you this breath as an extension of my consciousness so you can feel me connected to you. Mm-hmm. And what you want to be able to do is from this position, I always recommend starting with the hips. You want to unlock your hips so that you could do an anterior and posterior pelvic tilt. So for anyone who doesn't know what that is you just want to practice having your hips tilt forward by arching your lower back slightly. And you could even put your hands on the sides of your hips as you do this. And then you want to tuck your tailbone underneath you and flatten your lower spine. So the hips are just moving forward and back. Arch the lower back, flatten the lower back. Now, what's really important in alpha is you notice this is a sagittal plane movement, meaning it's only happening forward and back. I'm not going side to side. There's no figure 8 because that immediately becomes omega. Mm. So we're staying in this sagittal plane of forward and back only. So we're bringing this subtle movement now, but we're not dynamic like omega. We're keeping symmetry and groundedness as we bring this slight movement. Mm. Once the hips are unlocked, now you start to bring the breath. So what you do is, as you arch the lower back, you inhale down into the genitals, and your belly gets big, your genitals get full, and it feels like you're almost packing energy down to the base of your body. And then as you exhale, it's like the breath just rises up like a vapor off of a waterfall. So a way to visualize this practice is on the inhale, imagine a waterfall is flowing down and filling this reservoir between your legs, saturating your genitals. And then as you exhale, only the mist is rising up through your heart and throat, just sensitizing your body and releasing any tension. So you inhale down, And then you exhale gently, because you're not sending the energy back up. You just want to release the effervescence of the exhale so that the energy stays low in the body. Again, because in alpha, we're grounding down, down, down. So from our body and our breath alone, our partner is now going to start to feel this heavy weighted presence that feels like confidence. And it's starting to feel very penetrative in a way too. It's very commanding just to sit and breathe in this way. And if you're staying present with your partner and you're not getting tense as you do this, your partner will start to feel your presence grow. It's like you're becoming the size of the room as you do this. So the third step we want to add to this practice, and this is where we become penetrative, is so now we have this grounded posture. We now have this grounding breath. We're exhaling up like vapor. And now as you look at your intimate partner, you're penetrating your partner with your eyes. You're penetrating with your eyes. It's like you're cutting into them or seeing into them. And then what you do is you inhale down into your own genitals. And then when you exhale, you imagine sending that exhale up between their thighs, into their belly, into their heart, into their throat, up the crown of their head. And now you have this breath cycle of breathing down into the genitals. And on the exhale, penetrating your partner from the bottom up. Inhale down into the genitals. Exhale, penetrating your partner from the bottom up. Now, when you get good at this, you'll be able to synchronize your breath to their body. So the breath is in sync with what their body's experiencing and feeling. Now, if you only did these three things as the alpha partner, which is alpha body, alpha breath, and alpha sex, which is now that penetrative quality, that penetrative quality of sex, those are the three lower scales of sexual polarity that we define in our work. That would be all you would ever need to do. If you just practice that, you could become a phenomenal alpha sexual practitioner. But clearly there's more things we can learn and we can do. Right. And we could talk about more of those, but that's the foundation. And then what happens from there is that presence becomes so polarizing as opposed to leaning into your partner. You lean back and your presence becomes so commanding, so penetrative, you become more like gravity, where your partner can't help but move towards you and climb on top of you and start touching you. And that's the energetics of alpha and omega. Alpha doesn't lean in. Alpha leans back and is like gravity, and omega dynamically moves towards, climbs on top of. And that would be the start of a sacred sexual yoga practice.
Awesome. That's like a perfect segue into this question that somebody wanted to ask, inspired by your work in the last episode. So this guy says, I have a question for Justin. It's about energetic penetration and leaning back. It's a perfect segue. I've heard Justin teach about leaning back and magnetizing the omega, and how when the alpha leans in, there is sometimes this repelling ick feeling to the omega, right? Is there a way for alpha to penetrate and physically pursue the omega that does not create a repelling ick? Because Justin has taught that the omega is turned on when she feels the alpha is controlling and holding back the 800-pound gorilla. Is there a way or time to let that gorilla out, without getting the ick? Doesn't she want that gorilla to have its way with her?
Absolutely. Let's do 3 techniques that could be used in this moment that I think would be a great starting point.
Cool.
The first technique has to do with the breath and the attention. So what a lot of men might do is, as they lean back, they kind of withdraw from her. They almost imagine that leaning back means to withdraw from her. And that's not what it means at all. As you lean back physically with your body and you inhale down into your belly, the feeling is like your belly is getting bigger. And every time you inhale, you could almost imagine that inhale is expanding out and moving towards her and touching her belly to belly. So you are approaching her, but you're like approaching her just with your breath and your presence that's beginning to permeate her body. And you're moving in from the lower part And that's how you're creating this kind of proximity or closeness of engaging or moving towards her. Mm-hmm. You're doing it energetically from the base of your body. And when she feels that breath growing and touching her between her thighs, that's quite the experience, because at the same time, she doesn't feel rushed. She feels she has time and space, but she's also feeling your desire for her. And that's the unique combination that creates the hottest polarity. Is she wants to feel you in equanimity, rested back, there's no rush, I'm not going anywhere, and I want you. But even as you saw me just lean in a little bit as I said, I want you. I want is the nature of that lean in energy, but you're disciplining yourself to lean back and I want you. And that's the second way that we do this. So the breath growing at the base, moving towards her, is the one. Mm-hmm. Second is through vocal command. So we talked about being penetrative. If you observe what makes anyone penetrative in the world, it's their ability to speak with a commanding tone. Do this, do this, do this. I want this. So when we're uncertain, not confident or not penetrative, we'll be like, is it okay if I kiss you? Do you like this when I touch you? Is it okay to do this? And that is a reaction.
Yeah.
That's a reaction, and it's completely understandable and reasonable. I mean,
I wasn't laughing because I thought it was dumb or anything like that. I'm just laughing because of all the times I've done that in life because of such concern for and how it didn't actually serve the situation. But I think it's important because, like, with your model of polarity, like the lower triangle, I'll just put it on screen right now just so people can see what we're talking about. Like it's sensitivity and awareness and equanimity are fundamental first before you would do anything like that. And we kind of talked about that in the last episode, right? So what you're saying, this commanding consciousness, there's already the foundation of trust there, you know? And so that's the starting point. So within the model,
Yes, and that's absolutely correct. Because if we are aware of ourself and our partner and the impact we're having, that's awareness. If we're sensitive to our own experience and sensitive to our partner's experience, that's another skill of development, to be sensitive to their experience and know the impact that we're having. Yeah. What are they feeling? Do you know? Train that. And then to have equanimity, which means non-attachment. And that's what purifies our desire in a way that our desire is no longer this reactive, destructive element, but now it becomes an expression of our love. So as we're doing this, as I'm describing this, we're not doing it to manipulate our partner or get our selfish needs met. We're doing it as an expression of love because that's how we want to share our love with this person. And we know when it's appropriate to say, I want you, get over here, sit on my lap. And we know when it's appropriate to say, I see you're hurting right now. I see that what I said hurt you and I've lost your trust. Those are two different forms of communication, which I detail in our book. But having the awareness to know which is the medicine in that moment is a large part of sacred sex. So as we're bringing command, we're doing it from consciousness. We're doing it from love.
Yeah.
So when we do bring command, it's time to bring fire. To say to your partner, I want you. I want you to crawl on my body. That is now inviting desire and in a way leaning towards her without actually leaning towards her. So you're expressing your desire for her, your want, but you don't need her to do any of that. You can rest back here forever. You're not going anywhere. You love her and you burn for her. But there's no reaction. And that drives her sexually crazy. That's what every woman wants to feel in her partner is, I want you to desire me and I want you to just rest back forever and give me all the space and time that I need. And it's such a rare thing that women experience. They don't even know it's possible. But once they feel it, they go, holy crap, this is amazing. So that's what she wants. So you become very penetrative in your commanding voice. So alpha voice is commanding. And you can play with this. You could say either, I want to pin you down. I want to taste you. I want you to crawl over here right now. But if you want to make it even more penetrative than that, just get rid of I want. Lay down. Get over here. Right? Now suddenly it's... So this is how we develop that confidence in sexuality without actually having to lean in or kind of cause harm. We're doing this all at an incredibly safe distance. And what's amazing about this safe distance is it actually makes it hotter. It actually makes it way sexier than if you were to just lean in and grab her breasts or grab her hips.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when does the gorilla happen?
Yeah. Yeah, everyone's excited for the gorilla, right? So now you've got this sexual charge happening. If you're already at this point and she's opening, she's showing signs like this is amazing, and she starts to come towards you. Now she's putting her hands on your thighs. She's leaning in to kind of like put her lips against your neck. She's showing signs of interest. I want proximity from you. That's the sign. Mm-hmm. Clearly she's moving in. In this moment of leaning in that she does, you can start to bring some of that gorilla out, but you're doing it consciously with your breath. So take a breath in, lean in a little bit and get close to her and see what she does. If she immediately pulls away, you pull away. You're not in any rush. If she suddenly comes more towards you, run your hand up her spine and pull her right in. So now at this moment, you're dancing with that energy. What's really important for men is that any moment of you leaning in at all is going to create an experience in her body. And she's going to feel somatically. She's not even going to think about this. The experience she's going to get is either, yes, I'm ready for this, or, oh no, that was too much, too fast. I didn't want it to speed up that much. Mm-hmm. Most of the time, men, it's going to be the latter, where she didn't want you to speed up that much. So you're testing the water. She puts her thighs around your hips. And then you just slowly begin to bring your hands as if you're going to touch her thighs. And before you even make contact, see her body. Is she opening or closing? Do you see her body yearning to be touched, or is she starting to stop, move, and stop breathing? So before you even touch her thighs, bring your hands back and rest back and keep breathing. So you're now dancing with her body. You're bringing that gorilla out, but in small doses. Because what happens with men is that now that if you feel the energy build, you want to lean in, you want contact. And what they do is they'll lean in and they'll go past the point where now they're in full contact. She's closing. She's no longer turned on, and they just keep going. And then by the time he realizes that the sexual polarity is gone and she's not interested, he's like, what happened? I don't know the moment I missed. So much of sacred sexual practice is about learning that moment where you bring the gorilla out, you bring contact. Is she opening or closing? Is she opening? And if she's opening, if she's yes, keep bringing it. And then you can get on top of her. You could take her wrists and pin her down, right? You could get full in, you put your lips against her neck. And then she's like, ah. And then when she wants it the most, you slowly pull back and come back to breathing. And she goes, no, where are you? And you tease her. So it becomes this playful expression of unleashing that gorilla, but in a very artful way, where the secret to that is only bring enough to watch her response. The moment you see her start to close, you create space again. Then you come back in. And there will be a moment where you can just break through, because every time you come close and pull away, it creates more sexual tension to the point where she just wants to burst. And I think that's what we all want to feel in our sexing. We want to feel our partner hungry for us and bursting. So we have to know how to create that experience for them.
Yeah. And those moments when we're on top of them and grabbing them and bringing that's when the presence and the devotion piece from, it comes in everywhere, but it's especially important there too.
Absolutely.
Right? To not get lost in the, oh my God, I feel so good. I don't know. But no, I'm presence, devoted, in this connection, attuned, aware, sensitive, the whole thing.
That's exactly it. Because particularly as men, when our genitals get very stimulated, if you observe yourself, let's say masturbating, coming close to orgasm, as you approach orgasm, your shoulders round forward, your breath gets shallow, you get tense in your body. You're doing all the exact opposite of the things you were doing at the beginning of the practice. So this is why we train in sexual yoga to open the front surface of the body and breathe all the way down to the genitals. Because when you start to approach climax, you're still opening your body and breathing down to the genitals. And this is what allows you not only to have better sex, but to also slow down orgasm. So you're not ejaculating too quickly. And this is how you prolong lovemaking using these skills.
Yeah. And so we haven't explicitly said how to do this in a self-pleasure, self-solo sex cultivation thing, but you could fit the pieces together if you've been listening, right? So if somebody's listening and they don't have a partner and they want to cultivate this other style of sexual energetics, you could sit there, make a tall posture with your body and breathe in this way, rocking your hips back and forth, and keep a very attuned presence and cultivated, expanded awareness while you bring sexual pleasure to you, and just practice being in that space.
Absolutely. Yeah. A very simple practice you could do with box breathing is just sit in this posture that I've described using that pelvic rock, but inhale down into your genitals for a 4 count, hold in your genitals for a 4 count, exhale up for a 4 count, and then hold in the crown for a 4 count. And you're just feeling, what you're doing is you're practicing feeling sensation between your crown and your root. It's like you could feel the inside of your body. And as you do this practice, it's not necessary to feel some kind of magic sensation or visualize anything.
Yeah.
The best practice is to just actually notice what you can feel. And whatever you feel is fine. You don't have to feel anything extraordinary. Just feel whatever you can feel as you breathe down, as you hold in the base of your body, as you exhale up. You're just feeling, and it starts to sensitize the central channel of your body, which with enough practice opens up the possibility for multiple orgasm and running orgasm through your body. It has to do with the ability for you to sensitize these subtle areas in your nervous system.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's so worth it. It's so worth it to do that. So we're coming up here to the end of our time, but there's one more piece I'd love to bring in so we can close with, and it fits perfectly with what we've just been talking about. And it was a big aha moment for Naima and I when we came to your workshop. It was very cool. It was a small enough workshop that we had an opportunity to go up in front of the group and be a demo and get into a scenario which we've encountered trouble in our own intimacy, and trouble meaning it's just like something happens and the desire fades, right? And so what has happened for us in the past that we're now very cognizant of, thanks to these practices, is that if one of us was going down on oral sex to the other person, either her or I, say I'm receiving this, right? I might have the tendency to just just totally lay back and relax and be serviced, right? But unconsciously, right? That wasn't the agreement, that wasn't the arrangement. And so there's almost like a detachment that I would go into, or she would go into this sometimes. And what ended up being catalyzed from that is whoever was giving the oral sex would feel like, where is my partner? What's happening with her? What's happening with him? I'm not feeling him. He's just receiving. And so when we got up in front of people, you noticed that, and we sort of acted it out without touching genitals. But there was the inquiry around if you're receiving, you have to complete the circuit. You have to keep the energy flowing internally. And so there was, you advised me, I was the demo laying down in that moment, to start moving my hips and breathing in a certain way that was generative, that would allow me to experience more pleasure, but that would also demonstrate to her that I was still with her in those moments. And immediately that switched something for her where she was more turned on and this circuit of arousal was happening. And that was such a key piece to be aware of for us, and then to bring in and to be mindful of throughout the whole sexual experience for everybody. There is a circuit happening, and I heard you allude to it in a number of different ways when you were speaking, but I wanted to just speak directly to it and see what you might want to add or say about it.
Well, I think you've described it perfectly. I mean, that is the teaching. And when we're participating in any kind of sex acts with our intimate partner, that breath is crucial because it completes the circuit between our two bodies. The moment we kind of stretch and check out and we no longer feel present, right? And even if in our minds we are present, our our partner doesn't feel our presence. And that's why by bringing it through our breath, through our hips, they feel, wow, my partner's with me. Yeah. Now, when you take that understanding, and let's say next time you go get a massage, you bring that to the massage parlor, your massage is going to be significantly better because the masseuse is going to feel you actually receiving and working with the body. And anytime I know people who practice this, or I myself, I go to a masseuse, they're always like, it's so wonderful to work on your body because your body's so responsive. Yeah. I'm not just working on a corpse here.
Yeah.
So when you bring that sexually, it's transformative for your partner and the experience that both of you can have. And one of the key things we are learning in this practice is this breath, this regenerative breath of conductivity, it could be called, where we're completing the circuitry, we're completing the circuit. And so when we're practicing the sexual yogas, one thing we often want to do is inhale down and exhale up and back up the spine. Inhale down and exhale back up. Because when we ejaculate, which is a degenerative act, it's a release. It feels good because we release and we go, but you feel depleted afterwards. Why is that? Because you've released the energy as opposed to recycled it. So normally the energy wants to go down and out, down and out. So you're losing life force energy. And the older we get, the more obvious that becomes, particularly as men. Yeah. So what you're training to do is to inhale down and then learn how to exhale that energy back up through your system. And when you practice this rightly, you'll feel you have more energy, you have more focus, you have more discipline, more clarity to bring to your purpose and your relationship. It's an incredible experience. And you start to, ejaculating just isn't as rewarding as it once was when you were just using it as a form of release. There's something so much more rewarding about keeping that energy. It's better than 3 cups of coffee every day to have that in you. It's an incredible form of potency. Yeah. So in the two-bodied practice and all of these practices that we teach, this conductivity is creating now the infinity loop between you and your intimate partner. Inhaling together, exhaling together, inhaling together, exhaling together through every element of practice. And that's what has you both, your bodies begin to converge at a depth that's beyond just the physical. Yeah. It becomes emotional, it becomes subtle body, it becomes spirit to spirit. And finding that oneness through all layers of your experience is the point of this practice until the two bodies dissolve as one.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And when you were speaking just a moment ago, you hit the nail on the head for what was happening to us. It wasn't necessarily that we were checking out of the experience. Like, we were very present in the experience, but we weren't demonstrating that we were present in the experience, you know? And so exactly. The circuit wasn't complete. And so it would fade and fizzle, and we would wonder, like, what's going on? What happened? Yep. You know, I love that. Absolutely. I love that piece. And you've mentioned a couple times, I don't think you actually said it exactly in this interview, but the first one you did, you said breathe your partner almost as a verb, you know, to breathe your partner as a verb. And I think that fits in perfectly. And I just want to name it. That's kind of what you meant, you know. It's like,
yes, yeah. You first learn to breathe yourself, then you learn to breathe your partner, and then you learn to breathe the world. As the phenomenal world arises in what you see, what you think, in the objects of life itself, you develop an intimacy and relationship with life itself, where you as consciousness are fully participating in this phenomenal world of beauty, of sensation, of tragedy, of suffering. The whole gamut of experience is here, and we can choose to either suffer that or we can learn to make love to it. And this path is about learning the latter.
Yeah, beautiful. Let's all take a breath to that. Yeah, that's a perfect place to close. Justin, thank you so much for part 2 of this conversation. Thank you so much for your work. We'll put links to everything, your book, your website, in the description of this episode. And any other last words you'd like to share before we close?
No, I'm just honored to be part of this. Thank you so much for having me back. I've really enjoyed both of our conversations, and I hope people get value out of it.
Totally. Yeah, thank you. And thank you, listener, or if you're watching this on YouTube, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about this. And if you have any questions, to leave those in the YouTube comment section. Thank you so much. Thank you again, Justin. I hope you all have a beautiful, beautiful rest of your day. I'll see you next time.